professionals show up energetically to make the impact they want in their careers. I want to welcome you to show number 90. It is called 3 Steps to Working with an Internal Recruiter. And please welcome my guest today, Anna Morgan. Anna, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So we connected through a mutual colleague and friend, Portia Parker Griffin. And for those of you who are faithful viewers, you remember the interview I did with Portia a few weeks ago about the importance of having a professional resume. It's some show in the 80s. We can go back and take a look at it. But Portia was kind enough to connect us. And we just kind of hit it off. And I was like, I'd love to have you on the show just to talk specifically really about the ins and outs of recruiting and how people who are in career transition may really benefit from working with somebody like you.
Absolutely. So I've been on both sides, agency recruiting and internal recruiting. And that's what, we want to talk about today. Yep. And internal recruiting is that recruiter in a corporate entity that handles all the openings for that organization. So it is typically a part of talent acquisition or the HR department. It aligns with compensation, performance management, and all other players in HR. But the sole responsibility of a talent acquisition or internal recruiter is to attract top talent, interview, connect them with the hiring managers, and onboard them into the organization.
Got it. So Anna, when you're meeting someone, and let's say that they're working with you in this internal recruiting capacity, what are some of the things that I guess before we even get into these 3 tips, but like, what are some of the things that you might say are misconceptions or misnomers that people may have that really kind of don't get the relationship off to a really good start?
Great question. So I think I can say that job seekers are singular focused, right? They see a position they're interested in and they apply for it. And so they are very focused on that one position, and they may not be cognizant that the person they're speaking to is also working 30 to 40 other positions. So that is going to tie into some of the tips and how you engage in with an internal recruiter and how you stay top of mind, because any recruiter lives in a world of many browsers, the phone ringing, people coming up to their desk. It's kind of like rapid fire. So we prioritize who we're speaking to, who we're interviewing, who we're setting up interviews for, based on our hiring manager's needs. So they may not be aware of all the back end side of what a internal recruiter is responsible for. So just being cognizant of that is maybe step 1.
Okay. Right. And so I want to differentiate a little bit too, right? So, we're not talking about somebody who works as a headhunter. Correct. or a job finder for somebody, right? And certainly, we both know from our own work, but as career coaching, it's really more about kind of helping them navigate that career transition arc for them, as opposed to being like, hey, will you find me a job?
Right. And so, starting to build that relationship with the internal recruiter starts from that initial contact, which oftentimes is them simply applying for the position, and how their resume shows up in the applicant tracking solution or through LinkedIn.
Right. And so, we talk a lot on this show, and it's a lot of the work that I get to do specifically about how we get to show up and what showing up particularly looks like. And just for anybody who is listening, when we talk about showing up, I'm talking about 6 particular strategies. It's about setting ground rules, having intentional conversations, owning where you are, welcoming new opportunities, using your genius, protecting and promoting your brand. So thinking about that in terms of when we show up, there are things that I can imagine that in the rapid fire nature of your work and the need to handle a lot of different job openings that you have for your company and being able to find the most appropriate and best fit for those people. It really gets us to, these 3 tips that we're talking about in terms of working with somebody like you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love for you just to share with us, like, what specifically are these tips that
Mm-hmm.
really helps not only the job seeker build this relationship with the internal recruiter, but
Mm-hmm.
also in some ways, I'm guessing makes your job a lot easier as well.
Yeah, it's all about collaboration and ease of use. So I'm a huge fan of working smarter rather than harder on
Mhm.
both sides. So I think I can generalize and say a lot of recruiters are a little bit ADD, and I think my friends in the agency side and corporate world would support that. But that's also what makes us really good at our job because there's so many moving parts that we have to be responsible for. So I think the first thing, going back into, is when they apply for the position, right? So we open up the application, we're reviewing the resumes. I see a resume that hits the qualifications that I'm looking for, and I'm going to want to contact this candidate. So it's really important that job seekers have their contact information right at the top of their resume, very easily, and that we can easily find. And so most likely I'm going to call the person first. I always recommend that they have a professional voicemail greeting because that's where that first impression starts about showing up. So I'll leave a voicemail, and then I'll typically follow up with an email that invites them to schedule a call, to set up a phone interview with me. And again, your email setup is important. You want to be cognizant of what it says. It should say annamorgan@gmail.com.
You mean you
And
can't have like sassy girl 458 at AOL.com?
right, right. And I always recommend, you probably do too, is that if you're a job seeker, you should probably have a separate job seeking email address as
Yes.
well.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure the resume is also saved as your name. I have done a couple different posts on this because, again, in that rapid fire nature, when we go to download that resume, the phone may ring, a hiring manager may walk up to our desk, and then I go back to search that candidate's name, John Norrell, and your name doesn't come up in my documents because your name was saved as resume.2020.
Mm.
So then I have to go back to the email and re-download it, resave it, and then send it on to the hiring manager. So if you think an internal recruiter talks to 10 to 15 candidates a day, that's a lot of renaming resumes, which ultimately means time. And it just lessens the opportunity for error. So
Right.
clear contact information, save the file name as your name, as a PDF or a Word document. So I would start with those few things.
Great. Um, One of the things that I know in my work with my clients and dealing with a lot of people who are just, they're very heart-centered, they're very caring. The last thing they want to be perceived as is being pushy or
Mm-hmm.
forward. And so there will often be a lot of this mind drama around, well, when is the right time to, engage or
Mm-hmm.
reconnect if I didn't set up an agreement when I was talking with the recruiter, if I was talking with the hiring manager.
Mm-hmm.
Talk with us a little bit about some of the things that a job seeker can do to really build a more professional and connected relationship with you to make this process easier.
Absolutely. I mean, and I'll scream it from the mountaintops. I am all about connection over qualifications. As we have more boomers and traditionalists exiting the workforce, I'm motivating leaders to be more empowered to bring in people that they feel they can mold and build character and train. But in that regard, regarding that question, it's just like sales. The more times the internal recruiter sees your name either in an email or on LinkedIn, it's always helpful to come at an internal recruiter at two different angles. And LinkedIn and email is the most effective, gets my attention the most. So oftentimes someone will apply for a position, send me a LinkedIn request and introduce themselves. They'll say, "Hey, Anna, I applied for this position. I just wanted to introduce myself. Here's my resume. I look forward to hearing from you." Or they will ask to schedule time with me. And if they're very specific about the position and asking for my time and they have clarity around what they want, I'm more inclined to accept that and send them my calendar to schedule a phone interview with me.
Nice.
What I don't recommend is sending in the email, sending the LinkedIn, and then just saying, "Can you please keep me in mind for any positions at your company?" We just don't have the bandwidth to do that,
Right.
And so it's a partnership between the job seeker and the corporation. They need to be active on the job board and see what positions. And then when you get on the phone, you mutually determine which positions would be best aligned with the person's skills, personality, education, and all those things.
And I love what you said too about this kind of, vague or blanket statement about, hey, keep me in mind for things. And sadly, it's just they're not really familiar with the magnitude of the work that you have to do on your end.
Right. And how many requests we get
Right.
like that daily. I mean, it could be 10 to 15. And by the time you get to that 15th one, you're like, oh, and I'm a servant leader, I lead from my heart and I want to help people, and that's what has gotten me into coaching, is to share this experience, strength, and hope with people so they have this knowledge so they can take it into their job search strategy and put their best foot forward. So I also advise candidates to definitely look at the profile of the person, of that internal recruiter, and try to find something personal about them, going back to that connection over qualifications. They might see that they went to the same college as I did, or they played the same sports as I did, or they volunteered for the same organizations. That helps candidates show up even better when they do get a phone interview or a face-to-face interview, because you have that rapport there.
Right.
So I would say, doing your research on the internal recruiter and on the company. And I'm sure you have this situation where you say, "Well, how much do you know about such and such?" And they say, "Well, oh, I know you're a blank company." And you're like, "Okay, anything else?" And then just always knowing the position that you're interviewing for. So many people show up to a phone interview and they're like, "Oh, I think I applied for like 3 different positions."
Oh, yeah. I remember when I was hiring, that always just frustrated the heck out of me.
Yeah.
Which was, I don't care how many positions you've been applying to. I want to know why this is important to you. Like, be present with me. Tell me what you're interested in here about that. Cause it's just then becomes just a big opportunity to disconnect.
Right. And then it puts the internal recruiter in this place where we're trying to like pull this information out and we're doing all the work and it doesn't feel balanced. Right. And that's where, when candidates show up, having done the research, having, interested in building rapport, showing up with energy, the flow of that conversation goes so much more gracefully. And it also puts the job seekers at ease if they are prepared. Then they're not stumbling through their questions, their resume, those sorts of things. And it just helps them put their best foot forward.
So I wanna ask you a follow-up question, and I am gonna put you a little bit on the spot here.
That's
because
fine.
we didn't necessarily talk about this. One of the things that I always talk with my clients about, especially when they are going in for an interview. So that interview is either the initial phone screen or they're at the final stage of the interview process.
Okay.
Is about getting the hiring manager or the recruiter or the HR professional interested in who you are as a candidate. I
Absolutely.
always say that, we're all interesting individuals.
Yeah.
When we get somebody interested in us and what we do and who we are, the level of conversation is different.
Way up. Right.
Yeah.
And it makes the internal recruiter become a cheerleader, a champion, and this is also for me the way my mind works. Like, I want to know something personal or interesting about you that kind of surprised and delights me. And I remember candidates based on quirky things about their resume. If they were an Eagle Scout, if they climbed the Appalachian Trail, if they went hot balloon riding, I mean, whatever it may be. But then I'll be like, oh, that's Laura Smith, the hot balloon lady, and
Yeah.
it's like, and it's because we're talking to so many people and there's so many moving parts. That's where that connection and really understanding the candidate story, where the
Mhm.
internal recruiter gets fired up to tell their story. So, say you get on
Right.
the phone and there's not a fit for that particular position. But if they have taken these tips and shown up in the ways that we suggest,
Mhm.
there's a higher likeliness that that internal recruiter is going to be an advocate for them.
Yep.
And then they are going to market their skills and experience to the leaders in that organization. They're going to be proactively selling or marketing them into those departments that would match with their skills and experience. That's the power of showing up and building that relationship with an internal recruiter. Now, internal recruiters in a lot of companies could be seen as um, paper pushers, right? We just,
Mhm. Sure.
they screen 20 people a day and they put the notes in and they send them on to the hiring manager. But every organization is a little bit different. But I feel like if you follow these tips and show up this way, you're increasing your probability of having that connection and having that advocate and that person who's going to think of you first when they have that opening.
Right.
And that goes back to the candidate also being able to tell an effective story of how they can add value to that company in that position.
I love what you said there, and that is so spot on, right? I mean,
Mm.
it is about building the connection. You mentioned
Mhm.
earlier about connection over qualification. It's
Yeah,
about being memorable, right? You,
absolutely.
you made an impression that this one position you're applying for may not be the right fit, but you
Mhm.
will then be top of mind when something else comes along. And like you said, the recruiter then gets to be a champion for your candidacy
Mhm.
as you move forward, right?
Yeah.
How much do we know that the most difficult question in any interview is the one that never really sounds like a question, which is that tell me about yourself,
Mhm.
that starts right off the bat,
Yeah.
right? And it's about, here's who I help, here's what I help them do specifically, here's
Mhm.
why the work's important to me,
Mhm.
and here's a little tidbit or fact.
Mhm.
I As I got older and I progressed through my career, of course you get better and better at this.
Mhm.
And I would always end that little 30-second pitch with, and no pun intended, in my spare time, I'm a professional bowler and an avid game show fan and was on the game show Chain Reaction back in
Right.
2006. And I was like, nobody is ever going to come into this interview and say they're a professional bowler and a game show nut. And
Right.
if they are, I want to meet them. So,
Yeah. If you
right?
were my candidate, I'd be like, John, the game show man,
Exactly. Right.
and there. So, and that's why, like, I tell candidates, don't be afraid to show some personality on the
Yes.
phone,
Yes.
and be a human. We are human beings helping each other, and
Mhm.
we all put our pants on the same way. Like, no one is better than each other, but it is important, and the work you're doing, John, is so valuable because it is hard being a job seeker, and candidates are defensive and they feel like they're interrogated and
Yep.
they're exhausted and their resiliency is low, and so sometimes it is hard to show up. But that's why coaches are valuable and accountability partners are so important to let them know that we can support them through this process. And
Mhm.
then one of the other tips, as you're building this relationship with the internal recruiter, so play it forward. Say you had an initial phone call with a recruiter and you set expectations and boundaries at the end of the call. You ask for next steps. The internal recruiter should be able to tell you the next step is either a phone interview or a face to face interview. And I usually tell my candidates, I will get back to you in 2 to 5 business days. I give myself an out. I say, if you don't hear from me, feel free to send me a follow-up email,
Mm.
just because the nature of my business, and I'm
Sure.
human, things happen.
Right.
So the key is in the follow-up. So I always recommend, when you've had that first interaction with an internal recruiter, send the follow-up email and reference the date you originally spoke, the position you spoke about, and then anything personal like we're talking about that would make the candidate memorable to the internal recruiter. So if there is anything special about the candidate's circumstance, if they were looking to relocate or they wanted to reframe their availability, put that all in the email, along with reattaching the resume and making sure that their contact information is at the bottom of that email signature. Because it's so important when these emails come in, if I see that and I go, oh yeah, I got to schedule that interview, that I can just pick up the phone and see the phone number right there, instead of having to drill back in the resume or go back into the applicant tracking solution.
Love that. Absolutely. And I will say that the fact that you are so direct and you say to a job seeker, I'll follow up with you within 2 to 5 days, but if I don't, feel free to
Mhm.
contact me. Not
Yeah.
everybody does that.
Hmm.
And so for the job seeker, it's understandable when she or he thinks that, well, they forget about me. I don't want to be a pest and everything. But
Yeah.
they also at that point could simply say, hey, if I don't hear from you within a week, and I'm sure you're understandably busy,
Hmm.
would it be okay if I followed up with you?
Absolutely. And I always tell candidates that, like, yes, um, and that's why I think the language around how you follow up is so important. Like lately, I've seen, and that's why at the first tip we talked about, just understanding a little bit more of the back office of what internals recruiters deal with, is
Mhm.
because I get emails that say, hi, Anna, when can I expect to hear back? And I'm like, expect to hear back about what position,
Right.
where, who are you?
Right.
Like,
Yep.
um, or, my name is Jasmine, and we talked last week and I was looking for an update. And I'm like, okay, great, you're following up, but be more specific. More specific is always more profitable and more
Mm,
impactful.
nice. Agreed.
Yeah.
So, as always, this happens with these interviews. Time seems to fly
I
by, and we
know.
need to start wrapping up. But
Okay.
Anna, one of the question I always end these interviews with, and I love how people get to put their own perspective on things, is this question, which is, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to create their next advancement opportunity?
So, for someone who's looking to create their next advancement opportunity, I would just say, don't wait. Seize the day. Carpe diem, the time is now. Um, I think everyone should be an active job seeker. Not
Mm.
willy nilly, just, always looking necessarily, but being open to opportunity, being open to receive what might show up for you as you show up as a leader in your industry. And then be active on LinkedIn. Yeah, that is the biggest thing I can recommend for any people that are looking to be in transition, or to build their personal brand as an authority in their niche or their career. Because you never know. You never know what may happen. And if you're leveraging those relationships and showing up as that authority, you're going to increase your chances of having warm conversations if and when you need to make a move, or pivot in some way.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
absolutely.
All right. So Anna, if any of our listeners, our viewers want to connect with you or follow up with you, what's the best way
Absolutely.
for them to connect?
So the best is LinkedIn. It's just Anna Morgan, your career BFF.
Okay.
And I'm also on Instagram, the number one Anna underscore Morgan
Mhm.
on Instagram. I'm pretty active on my stories. You get a little ADD recruiter in the life pretty much daily, and very active on LinkedIn as well. So those are two places to get a hold of me.
Great. Absolutely. And I'm enjoying your Insta stories, so keep them coming. They're really good.
You know what? I
Yeah.
just keep showing up as myself and, share my experience, strength, and hope, and we'll see where it goes from there. So,
Absolutely. So connect with Anna on LinkedIn, follow her on Instagram. Absolutely. If I
yeah,
can be of any particular help to you today or in the future as you're watching this
yeah.
video, as always, you can email me at john@johnnerrill.com or private message me here. I also want to tell you about my new book. It is called Show Up: 6 Strategies to Lead a More Energetic and Impactful Career. We are at the beginning of March as we're recording this. This is set to get published by the end of the month, but you can go to my website at johnnerrill.com/book and get more information about that as well. So Anna,
Amazing.
have to
Yes.
have you back on at some point, and we need to
Yes,
reconnect down the
anytime. This
road
has been
and follow
amazing.
up.
I'm so honored to be here and I really, really appreciate it. You're an amazing human being and the community here is so lucky to have you and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, and right back
Yes,
at you. I have enjoyed getting to know you
likewise.
in this short span of time, and I see you as a great person as well, and also as a valuable connection. So I'm looking forward
Awesome.
to just supporting you and networking
Yeah,
with you as we get to move forward. So thanks
fantastic.
so very much again. Please follow Anna on Instagram, connect with her on LinkedIn. If you like
Yeah.
the video today, give it a thumbs up, hit the bell to subscribe for more videos. And Anna, to you and everybody else, I wish you a great rest of the day. Take care, everyone. Thanks again.
Bye.